I'm a North Shore girl, and I'm always going to be a North Shore girl, and I'm always going to sound like it. I am never going to sound like the BBC. And the day that I do, someone needs to give me a little whack and say, get back to reality. And to me, that was something about Darby, that she did not try to be something she wasn't. She was quintessential Canadian. And she owned it, and it looked so good on her, and it fit her so well. And I thought, what appeals to me in her is how real she is.
Welcome back to the Chesterfield. I'm your host, iskwē.
And I'm your other host, Ben Rayner. The Chesterfield is a place where we talk to Canadian creators about their favorite pieces of Canadian art, and also about the importance of Canadian culture in general.
Today, I'm thrilled to speak about Canadian rock and roll with one of our country's coolest and hilarious broadcasters. Candy Palmater is a stand-up comedian, a radio and TV host. You know her from her own show on APTN, The Candy Show. She's also a big supporter of Canadian music and has chosen for her Chesterfield pick one of her favorite bands, the Headpins.
You keep stealing all the fun topics from me this year, I feel like. The Headpins were born partly of Chilliwack, and I am a huge Chilliwack fan.
Ah, well, there you go. Now, you'll just have to watch this episode then, because it actually was a lot of fun. Candy and I have known each other for many, many years, and I'm always so amazed at her depth of knowledge of metal. And the way she was able to just dive in and pull out all of the details about this band and why she was so influenced and so on. It was actually really, really interesting to hear, considering, like I said, Candy and I are buds, but also to have that perspective of hearing about this woman who was so influential and yet oftentimes not, people weren't aware that she was Canadian. She was touring with major bands like Kiss. It was crazy.
All right, I'll let you go have fun without me. Before I go though, let me remind viewers that the Chesterfield is produced by Friends of Canadian Broadcasting. Friends is a non-profit citizens group powered by individual Canadians just like you who care passionately about our arts, our news, and our cultural sovereignty. So if you're curious and you want to get involved and maybe help us make more episodes of the Chesterfield, visit imcancon.ca after the video and learn how you can make a difference.
Well, thank you, Ben. Normally I would say see you next week, but I just realized this is actually our last episode this season. So thank you to everyone for participating, for joining, for hanging out, all of the things. And of course to my wonderful co-host, Ben, for being awesome.
Thanks, iskwē, as always.
And now, without further ado, Candy Palmater.
Hello, Candy.
Hey there, good to see you, even if it's virtual.
Is it, right? This is 2020 extended?
I'm hoping someday I'll see you in person again. I'm hoping someday I'll see anybody in person again.
You have selected a very interesting piece for our conversation today.
Yeah, so I selected Darby Mills, who was formerly the lead singer of the Headpins. It was hard when I got the call out, because I was like, oh my God, there's so many Canadians I love and that have had such a big impact. I went through, my two favorite voices in Canada are Katie Lang and Burton Cummings. And then, my comedy idol was John Candy. The fact that a big man like that played a romantic lead in movies was incredible. There were just so many people, even Luba, who I always thought was completely an unsung hero in Canadian music. But when it came right down to it, I'm a rock and roll chick.
Yeah.
I've always swung between classic rock and heavy metal. And as a young girl in northern New Brunswick, I had two radio stations that I could get clearly. One was the local radio station called CKNB, Campbellton, Dalhousie. That was a little tagline. And CKNB had from 9 o'clock till noon, the Trading Post, where people would call in and say, yeah, it's Arthur Savoy here. I got a 1972 Bombardier snowmobile for sale, and you can reach me at 684-2872. And so that was the whole morning. Then in the afternoon, it was country. And then at night, you got top 40, and that was it, and that was all. So I had to get all my music at the music store. And the music
Ah,
store that I went to was a place called Music Dick in the Sugarloaf Shopping Mall in Campbellton, New Brunswick. And I remember finding the Headpins. And honestly, back then you could listen in the store, right? Like you didn't have to
right.
buy something I heard. You put the headphones on. And when I heard Darby Mills's voice, I was moved to another planet. And in a nutshell, although I cannot sing to save my life, if I could sing, Darby Mills's voice is the voice I would sing with.
I watched a documentary on her in preparation for today's interview. I knew the Headpins, of course. I am very familiar with Darby Mills, but watching this documentary, it was really fascinating to see the journey and the path that she took from being with the Headpins only for a few years to her solo career, to retiring, coming out of retirement, going back on the road, all of these different pieces. I wonder if any of these moments in time, was her career journey also something that you were interested in, that you followed along with?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a certain level of authenticity about Darby that I don't find in a lot of people. As I said, I was a metalhead growing up, so when Lee Aaron hit the scene with her big sword as the Metal Queen, I was right there with her,
Yeah.
and was so excited that she was Canadian. And then once metal was no longer being played on top 40 radio, when grunge kind of pushed it out of the way, all of a sudden Lee was singing jazz. And I'm not saying you have to stay in one lane, but I'm just saying that there is an authenticity to the fact that if you see Darby right now, she looks exactly the same. And first of all, I bow down and kudos to her. With 3 kids, the body looks the same. She still has the big hair, which I just absolutely love. And she's still singing her absolute guts out. So there's a real authenticity to the fact that, listen, I am a rock singer and this is how I sing, and it's beautiful.
I'm also curious, she was on the road, so this would have been, I guess, pre-children, but she was on the road with some major hitters in the rock world. She toured with Kiss, she toured with all kinds of people, and this was like, way up there. How did that make you feel in terms of seeing not only a woman on these stages, and a lot of the media that covered her performances often commented on how she would upstage the opening acts, which I found really fascinating, because you're putting, number one, a woman in the rock world on the stages, and she's just like out screaming them. And then number two, she's playing these huge stages with these huge American acts touring the world, and she's Canadian.
She's Canadian, and she's so absolutely Canadian. Like, if you watch her on stage, she is like every band you ever went to see at the Legion Hall, right? Like she doesn't try to pretend she's something else. It's like, I'm here to sing, honey. I'm not here for your visual, entertainment. I'm not here as a piece of an adornment. I'm here to make you feel something below your belt when I hit my high notes.
Now, did you always know that she was Canadian?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And in fact, I saw her in her solo career at the Misty Moon in Halifax on a Wednesday night. I think I paid $7 for the ticket. And, if I ever get to interview her, I'll have to ask her, like, do you remember the crazy 22-year-old that was just losing her mind right in front of the That was me. That Misty Moon in Halifax, man, I saw the Tragically Hip there for $5. And it was on their very first EP, and there was maybe somewhere between 20 and 25 people in the audience in this huge venue. Really? And he just, and I remember Gord was biting his finger until he made it bled, but they just rocked their asses off for 25 of us. And it was
amazing.
Fabulous. Yeah. The Misty Moon was a great one.
Did Darby influence in any way your view of what Canadian women might be able to accomplish in a, international scope?
Yeah, I mean, I think back to the very first time that I was on Q, right? That I got called to do the audition on Q Radio.
You were fantastic on Q.
And thank you very much. And, some of those producers are young and they don't have a lot of life experience. And I was getting a little bit of feedback from them that I was kind of chuckling at, because I think they were trying to be clever. And it's like, listen, I might be a comedian, but I'm also a lawyer. I'm a very intelligent and well-educated person. And what you're trying to say there is you can hear the Atlantic Canada in my voice. And here's the news. I'm a North Shore girl, and I'm always going to be a North Shore girl, and I'm always going to sound like it. I am never going to sound like the BBC. And the day that I do, someone needs to give me a little whack and say, get back to reality. And to me, that was something about Darby that she did not try to be something she wasn't. She was quintessential Canadian, and she owned it, and it looked so good on her, and it fit her so well. And I thought, what appeals to me in her is how real she is, how I feel like if I do get to interview her, I could crack open a bottle of wine afterwards and we could cackle deep into the night.
Right.
And when I hit the stage, or when they turn the microphone on, whether it's on The Social on CTV or whether I'm on CBC or wherever I am, I try to remember that, to be quintessentially who I am. And who I am is a Mi'kmaq girl from the North Shore of New Brunswick.
Mm-hmm.
It's a place that's half French and half English. And if you listen real deep, you can hear that little bit of that accent. I had a horrific lisp as a kid. I worked hard to get rid of, but every now and then you can hear that slide through too. And I think all that does is endear my listener to me, because it allows them to see who I am. Because if you meet me for a coffee or a beer or a martini, or you hear me or see me on stage, I'm the exact same person. I don't have two different personas. And
I can attest to that.
Thank you. And to me, Darby, that she set that mold, and unlike a lot of people who, and in my career, I've interviewed a lot of famous people who were completely different than what I thought they were going to be.
Right.
And Darby, man, she's always who she is, and she's still doing it.
I'm curious what you think about, this idea of maintaining Canadian culture and the relevance and importance of what Canadian culture is. Now, I throw this to you with a bit of a taste of what your answer might be, but I'm curious, how you feel about that, how you feel Canadian culture, language, our references, our tastes as, Canadians, and kind of what, Canadian content is like for you in your mind.
I feel that for decades, what controls Canadian content is what I imagine in my mind are a bunch of non-artists who are likely not very popular in high school, who are seeking revenge in their adult life, and choosing things that they think are like so obscure. So like, this is higher brow. This is, I remember once someone slapping me on the wrist for something I spoke about on a national platform. And I said, you wanted me to be funny. And this person who has zero sense of humor, has never been on a stage, never held a microphone, said, we were expecting smart funny. And it's like, lady, listen, man, I graduated valedictorian in my class until Housing Law School. So check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Right.
Understand who you're talking to.
Much.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, I love Leonard Cohen, but I never would have picked him for this conversation, because all the people who say, what is Canadian? Oh, yes, absolutely, Leonard Cohen. Not so much Geddy Lee. What is Canadian culture? Oh, yes, absolutely, Katie Lang. Now, not at the beginning of her career, but now, not Darby Mills. So, I just feel like people have such a death grip on that. And then even when Indigenous artists hit, it was like, sometimes I feel like whether they get what's happening or not, they embrace it because they think that somehow makes them higher brow. Right. If you know what I mean. It's again that idea that people who don't have the creative vein, making decisions about what is and is not Canadian culture. I mean, think about Indigenous art, right? For years, we had to argue that it was art because they told us it was craft. And it's like, no, it is art, man. You look at intricate beadwork or quill work, that is art. That is not craft. But for so long, people just held in a death grip what is and isn't Canadian, and what's considered great for the masses. And on some level, I think we cater too much. Like, I remember being told once, I was doing an article about a podcast, an American podcast called A to Z.
Okay.
And I was told by the producers, now you have to explain that you're saying the word Z because that's the actual name of the podcast. Because, in Canada, we're supposed to say Z, and, the listeners will get really angry. And I started to laugh and I said, yeah, 20% of my communities don't have potable water. And if your biggest concern today is hearing me say Z instead of Z, rest assured, I'm going to say Z 36 times in this 7-minute segment because get over your privilege. Like, seriously, if that's what you think is the pressing issue of Canadian identity, right? Like, but that when you're playing in this world, which is a whitewashed world still, these are the things that you run into. And it's too bad because, again, I think Leonard Cohen is incredible. He is incredible. My favorite, he wrote my second favorite song of all time, which is Hallelujah. Favorite song of all time.
What's your first favorite song of all time?
Bruce Springsteen's Thunder Road. The lyrics in that song are just like epic. but I think there's a lot of like hard rocking. If you were at a dance or in a club in the 80s, there were a lot of incredible Canadian voices that you heard all the time,
right,
that never get touted as the thing. Like, I love Bryan Adams, but I loved Corey Hart too. Right. And people talk about Corey Hart almost like he was a joke. And it's like, he wasn't a joke. Man, he was at the top of the heap for a while there in the 80s. And to ever get to the top is a big deal. It's like when someone says, oh, well, they're a one-hit wonder. Well, how many hits did you have to go to number one? Oh, that's right. 0.
Yeah.
So that one-hit wonder is one up on you. And I just hate that in Canada, we have this weird feeling of we don't embrace what's super popular. We don't embrace the hits.
Right.
And that's what I once asked in an interview, do you think Canada has swag? And I said, no. And that's why. Because in the United States, man, when you got a hit, you are touted. You have done it.
Yeah.
Here it's like, no, if everybody listens to it, it's not cool enough. Oh, people, that's because you were not popular in high school and you're reliving some kind of trauma. And you need to like let that go, because if we had swag, if we really embraced what is really good and hooky and awesome about Canadian culture, we'd be way further ahead.
Yeah. Candy Palmater, everyone, thank you so much for coming to be a part of this today. I have known Candy for many, many years, and I was so excited that you were able to join us.
It was really lovely to spend some time with you, and I can't wait till lockdown is over so that I can see you in person, see you on stage, be on stage myself, right? We're all missing getting back to that. And I think right now the theme in lockdown is that Canadian art, whatever it is, we miss it. We all miss it. We miss having 100%. The live experience.
Yeah.
I need to get in the pit and try to love someone, to quote Kid Rock.
And that's a very good point, that the pandemic has definitely shown me just how much we value art. We need art. I need art, and so thank you for coming out today to talk about Canadian art and talk about how Darby Mills impacted you in your life and your journey. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Wallalan.